Hi, I'm Spencer Christian. On this episode of Tracks Ahead, we'll visit an astounding 15-inch gauge railroad on a game preserve in the Midwest. We'll visit Kyoto, Japan and look in on a steam museum and train ride. And we'll head to the Smoky Mountains for a visit to a new public layout. Now, it might sound glamorous to own your own railroad, but the reality is it's a very tough business. Only the strong survive, and even then it takes a little luck along with lots of hard work. Let's go out to the plains of South Dakota, where we're going to introduce you to a man and his railroad.
Alex Huff is a survivor, a very hard-working survivor. Much of his adult life has been spent in the short-line railroad business, where folks often last just a few short years. Huff works here in Chamberlain, South Dakota, a Missouri River town 135 miles west of Sioux Falls. It's the home and headquarters of his Dakota Southern Railway. It runs on 190 miles of track between Mitchell and Dakota. The track is leased from the state. In the 1970s and 1980s, when railroads were going bankrupt and track was being abandoned, the state of South Dakota stepped in and became a major player. Alex Huff had worked in the short-line freight business around the country, and it was more than 20 years ago when the state asked Alex to take over this route. He knows these old Milwaukee road lines like the back of his hand. There were years, before he was pushed out by the big boys in the railroad business, when much of his track time was spent moving wheat. It was sent east to the flour mills or south to the Gulf Coast so it could be sent to Asia.
Well, this is a big grain production area. A lot of high-quality wheat comes out of this part of the state. A lot of it goes in the domestic mill market east of Chicago. And having rail has had a definite effect on how much the elevators can offer for grain. Recently, as part of an agreement for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe to acquire state-owned track at Mitchell, we were granted access to other railroads. And that's why we're going back into the grain business, because we now have a working relationship with BNSF competitors.
Now, the main product moved by the Dakota Southern is fiberboard from paper mills in the South. It's made into a variety of cartons for packaged consumer products.
Well, one of the new primary cargoes that we've got is a company that prints food cartons. And those, they ship in inbound rolls of what I would call cardboard, which become pizza boxes amongst other things. And those cars have to be positioned inside the plant so that they can unload through the same door the cars were loaded. Now that means that we use one of the last two active railroad turntables here in the state of South Dakota to rotate the cars as necessary so they can be lined up correctly when they go inside the plant. The plant's unusual in another way in that the track is actually physically inside the building. And because it's food grade packaging, we have to wear hairnets, even I, and earplugs, and of course the usual safety gear. But the only thing you can have in your mouth basically is your teeth. And but it's been good business for us. It basically tided us over during a period when we weren't moving grain here.
Times change, and moving grain is once again a welcome part of the workload. In this business, the only constant is change. Right now, it's just Alex Huff and one full-time employee.
I like working for a short line quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. I get to do more than just ride on the trains. I get to fix the track and work on equipment as well.
It's a short-line railroad, but it's been a very long haul. As the train rolls over one of the largest railroad bridges in the country, nearly a mile across the beautiful Missouri River, Alex Huff has a moment to think about the changes he has seen during a long career in the railroad business.
Well, there's certainly been a few negative changes over the years. The biggest one that I see is a desire by the majors to try and reduce the number of small shippers. Basically, they want them to go on to intermodal are, I mean, some of them are fairly frank. Maybe they should truck instead. That's, of course, a niche that short lines fill, in my opinion. We can give a level of service that the smaller shipper needs, and that's pretty critical in holding on to the small shipper base. The future of Dakota Southern is going to be driven largely by the grain market, whether we're able to operate most of the line in the future. As long as we have good crops out here and fuel prices are what they are today, we have an economic reason to be here.
It's important to listen closely to people like Alex Huff. He knows this business inside and out, what works and what doesn't. It's a generation of knowledge that is a gift to the railroad industry.
The Dakota Southern is once again hauling grain across its 190-mile line. Now let's journey into the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri. Here we'll find one of the largest 15-inch gauge railroads we've ever seen, and it started as a tribute to a family member.
It's a miniature railroad of giant proportions. 5 miles of track, an 800-foot long tunnel, and the largest steam locomotive of its kind in North America. Tucked away in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri, the Arborway TT and Northwestern Railroad is a private 15-inch gauge operation built by banker John Woods and his mother Marjorie. These passionate rail fans began the project on their family farm back in 2001, spurred into action by the near-fatal illness of 90-year-old Marjorie.
Suffice to say that when she managed to survive, we elected to start this project. We had been talking about it. I had been talking about it for years.
John and Marjorie wanted the track plan to follow a scenic route to the Merrimack River, but little did they know the challenges they were about to face from this rugged landscape.
It's not railroad friendly. It's not flat at all. It's very hilly and rocky, a lot of rock. The soils need a lot of stabilization. We have erosion issues on the steep hills, and so it was very challenging and required a lot of engineering and professional work.
Working with John was a lot of fun. He has a big dream, and he has the means to make that dream become a reality.
I would think so.
One of the many professionals John consulted was Darrell Klompmaker of the Whiskey River Railway in Marshall, Wisconsin.
I would think the biggest challenge of building this railroad was the actual topography and the amount of dirt that needed to be moved, and the challenges of actually getting this layout built into the countryside. It's a beautiful layout.
We moved a total of about 500,000 cubic yards of dirt and rock, and we were fortunate in that the amount of cuts equaled the amount of fills.
2 tunnels were built for the railroad, including the 800-foot long Ozark. Highway construction crews were hired to do the job.
The Ozark Tunnel was actually sliced down, a very steep slice. Had to go down 60 feet from the top of Ozark Mountain. It's really a ridge, but we call it Ozark Mountain.
Once the right-of-way was complete, railroad manager John Bishop and a crew of hired hands spent 2 years in the site laying the entire 5 miles of track. The project got a boost when John acquired an entire model railroad from Glenn Bell of California, founder of the Taco Bell restaurant chain.
Long story short, Glenn was wanting to get out of the railroad business, and of course I was getting into it, and we just sort of hit it off, and we made a deal.
The Bell Gardens Railroad included 4 diesel engines and 24 cars.
Plus, of course, the track, 2.5 miles of track as well, and switches, and just everything you can't imagine. 12 tractor-trailer loads. As I said, it took 2 weeks to unload them.
In the meantime, Darrell was busy building additional equipment, including a diesel engine that became the workhorse of the railroad.
He wanted Darrell size. A lot of people call it Darrell size trains, and that's what he wanted. He wanted trains that were built the size that I build them, and I build them to fit full-size people.
When John requested a steam locomotive, Darrell spent 4 years building the 801, a 484 Northern, large enough to carry 2 adults side by side.
In 15-inch gauge, it's probably the largest in the United States by virtue of its size compared to the scale of the track, just its mass. This locomotive weighs about 20,000 pounds. a locomotive like this would be typical to more large mainline. John's Railroad is a little bit more like a mountain railroad out here. It has a lot of stiff grades to it.
Darrell Klumpmaker made it very clear that we don't want to go up or down more than 2%, and we have to hold to 200-foot minimum radiuses.
I had some concerns about its overall performance, but we kept looking back at the design and making sure it would handle it. I would say this is the largest railroad I've ever worked on. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and it's just a lot of fun, and I hope it continues.
Thanks to a special trust fund, Arbor Way has a secure future as a private family railroad, dedicated to the memory of John's mother, who passed away in 2007.
Well, I know that when her illness in February of 2001, when she nearly died, I'm convinced, as are other family members, that this project kept her alive many more years than would have been the case.
John has plans to extend the track another 5 miles in the near future. But for now, he's taking time to sit back and enjoy this spectacular railroad, especially from his favorite viewing spot called Panhandle Junction.
You get a good angle of the steam engine, especially the 801, when it's working up the hill and rounding that curve and then heading into the tunnel. It's a pretty impressive sight.
Although the railroad is not open to the public, rail fans can join a friends group for the opportunity to both work and play on the railroad. The Smoky Mountains are a breathtaking sight and an extremely popular tourist destination. In a moment, we'll head in that direction to show you something that will take your breath away. But first, we're going to visit Kyoto, Japan for a trip back in time. It's a city where 3 powerful figures still loom large: the emperor, the shogun, and the steam locomotive.
It's been called the heart and soul of Japan. This is Kyoto, city of 1,000 temples and shrines, and home to the elusive geisha. Most visitors enter this ancient city at a very modern place, Kyoto Station, built in 1997. Since the city has no airport, tourists often take Japan Airlines to Tokyo and complete the trip by rail, a fast 2.5 hours by Shinkansen bullet train. Nearly 1 million people pass through Kyoto Station every day for both travel and entertainment. Not bad in a city with a population of just 1.5 million. From Kyoto Station, local trains and buses fan out across a city that, at first glance, appears to be a very modern metropolis. This is, after all, the home of Nintendo. But here, in the city center, is the calm oasis of the Heian Shrine and Garden, built to honor Kyoto's 1,000-year reign as home to the imperial family. Although the capital moved to Tokyo in 1869, Kyoto has remained the cultural heart of Japan, preserving its long history and traditions. The Heian Shrine is one of 400 Shinto shrines in the city, and here in the ancient garden is another treasure from the past, Japan's oldest railcar, built in 1894. Evidence of rail travel as a part of Japan's proud heritage is not only seen in Kyoto, it's made loud and clear on a daily basis. 3 times a day, this steam locomotive makes its way through a small park south of downtown. It's one of several on display at the Umakoji Steam Locomotive Museum, housed in the oldest wooden train depot in Japan, the former Niho train station, built in 1905 and moved here in 1997. Inside are exhibits on the history and operation of steam locomotives in Japan. The museum was opened in 1972 to mark the 100th anniversary of Japan's rail system. But the real treasures are the classic locomotives kept in the roundhouse built here in 1914. The turntable is used to rotate the massive engines for easy storage. Japan's rail system got its start back in 1872 using trains from Europe and the US. But by 1912, they were building their own, and all 18 models here are Japanese-made. The maintenance area within the roundhouse continues to service the trains, keeping 7 operational. It's one of the things that makes this museum unique.
There are a number of transport museums in Japan, but this is the only one that keeps this many locomotives in working order.
School children are a common sight at the museum, but older folks are also here with vivid memories of riding on passenger trains like this one, the 1948 C-62, one of 49 super-large locomotives used on express lines. Another popular model, the C-57 No. 1, is called the Lady for her elegant style. She's often on loan working the scenic Yamaguchi Ghost steam train, but here at the museum she's also remembered for her first job, carrying the Emperor's train. The D-51 model was the first standardized modern engine in Japan. 1,100 of these were built between 1936 and 1945. It was built to haul freight, but today passengers can climb aboard for a ride through a nearby park. It's a trip back in time in a city with 1,000 years of history to explore. Just beyond the museum stands the landmark Toji Temple. Its 5-story pagoda is the tallest in Japan at 180 feet. There are 1,600 Buddhist temples in Kyoto, and one of the most extensive is Kiyomizu. Its main hall has a large veranda overlooking the city center. Below the temple is a popular shopping street full of Kyoto craft items, from kimono fabrics and porcelain dolls to ceramic tea bowls and Japanese fans. Just north of downtown is one of the most famous sights in all of Japan, the Golden Pavilion, a 3-story temple covered in gold leaf. Built in 1397 by a shogun as a symbol of his power and faith, the site was destroyed by fire in 1950. 5 years later, this full reconstruction was completed. Kyoto's famous sites are easily reached by a local rail system that's clean, efficient, and easy to use. One of the most popular rail lines ends in the hills at Aragishama, where nature lovers embark for a hike through the famous bamboo forest. But recently, the train station itself became popular by adding a perk to its platform, a hot springs foot bath complete with towel service. For 150 yen, you can buy a towel, soak your feet, and watch the trains go by. As night falls in the ancient neighborhood of Gion, the elusive geishas hurry to the tea houses to begin their evening's work. Trained in the arts of dance, music, and ceremonial tea, geishas begin their careers as apprentices called maiko, distinguished by their heavy white makeup. Tourists linger on the cobblestone streets, hoping to see them. Back at the Umakoji Museum, the D-51 has completed its final run of the day, and fans linger to watch the locomotive take one more turn in grand style.
Train travel has long been an important part of our culture. Many come here to share their memories with children. And hopefully they in turn will come, keeping this history alive.
In a city dedicated to preserving Japanese culture and its beauty, the Umakoji Steam Locomotive Museum is proudly and loudly doing its part.
The ancient mountains and the natural beauty of ridge after ridge of endless forest make the Smoky Mountains one of the most popular tourist destinations in America. Rolling through this heaven on earth on the western side of North Carolina are the beautiful trains of the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad, offering the romance and mystique of a bygone era. Either before or after you ride the railroad, take a relaxing walk through history and visit their Great Smoky Mountain Trains Museum right next to the depot in Bryson City, North Carolina. Admission is included with most excursion rides. Tim and Sue Cooper opened the museum in 2002, following 4 decades of collecting model railroading memorabilia.
Well, it started probably after 45 years of collecting Lionel trains, and we didn't have any place to put them up at home, so we decided we'd open a museum. So we looked at a lot of different options and ended up coming here to Bryson City in the Smoky Mountains and have enjoyed every minute of it.
Yes, definitely it has taken on a life of its own. I didn't think, number one, that I'd be very good working with my husband, number one. Number two, trains are not my primary interest, but it has been just such a blessing to be here and see people relating not only to trains they may have had in the past, but hearing their stories about how they had trains as kids, and how their uncles and their grandfathers worked on the railroad, and just seeing them relate that to something in miniature has just been really, really, it's been a blessing.
In order for it to work, we concluded that it had to be near an attraction that related to the museum. That if we just located like in Atlanta or some big city, that it just wasn't going to be the same feeling and it wouldn't be quite the same interest, because people would not be necessarily coming by to see it. But here with the Great Smoky Mountain Railroad, it really helps us draw people in that are coming to see a railroad, a real one, to ride it and experience it, and then they could come in here and see it all in miniature.
The collection includes thousands of Lionel engines, cars, and accessories. There are 2 giant operating layouts. Whatever your taste, they have it. There's G-gauge, Lionel standard gauge, O-scale, and HO scale. One thing that commands your attention is the seemingly endless number of animated scenes. It is not a static display. There is action, there is reality. But the neatest thing is that it's hands-on. If you want to run things, you can. Because the mission here is quite literally to share the spirit of model railroading with individuals of all ages.
I think that a lot of places, kids can't really do anything when they go. They can't make anything happen, and that really intrigues their interest and raises their excitement and all, and I think that's what really adds the layout at the other end of the museum here, which is all interactive for children, really provides, I think, that type of opportunity. The layout here that's behind us, of course, is kind of a different situation. It's giving a scene of western North Carolina, has a lot of detail on it, but there is over 18 animated items on the layout that really helps to provide some interest to kids too.
Our favorite is the Blue Comet that's back here in the back case. To me, that's a highlight only because it has some sentimental value to us, and that was Tim's dad's train. The other thing I think is the massive amount of trains that we have all in one place, and the range of time that it covers from 1918 up to the present.
Several of the interesting collective pieces that we have is the 1932 Blue Comet. We also have the City of Portland from 1935. 1937, we have the Rail Car Chief set, along with the 1937 New York Hudson J13. And then one of my favorites is the 1935 Hiawatha train from Milwaukee.
But one thing that makes any good museum more attractive is an appreciation of history. The collection here is a mind-boggling array of meticulously preserved and maintained classics from generations past, when model railroading and our great-grandparents were still so young. What brought oohs and ahs and smiles way back then caused the same reactions today. And under the ownership of the railroad and the guidance of the Coopers, it's expected the museum will be pleasing folks for a long time to come.
The Great Smoky Mountain Railroad now owns it, and so they have probably space to add on to the facility here. We still have over 2,500 locomotives and cars still to be displayed. So there's lots, I think, of opportunity for them to make the museum even more comprehensive than it is now. But we have over 4,000 locomotives and cars on display, and another 450 that operate on the big layout behind us.
The Smoky Mountain Trains Museum is a mandatory stop for someone of any age looking for a memory that will last a lifetime.
If you visit the museum, be sure to get tickets for the Smoky Mountain train ride. Well, that's all for this episode. Be sure to join us next time for more Tracks Ahead.